What's up guys, welcome back to Fancy Goldfish Fanatics. Today we're going to be talking all about LYMPHOCYSTIS, so make sure you stay tuned to find out more. Hey Fanatics family, welcome back. As always, check out the links in the description. Make sure if you're from the USA to use code JimmyGF at Jimmy Goldfish USA if you want to buy some fancies. And if you are from the UK and Europe, make sure to check out Star Fisheries and they can sort you out with all of your fancy goldfish needs. So now let's get straight into the video. Today's video is on LYMPHOCYSTIS. Many of you have been asking for this on the Facebook group, and I'm seeing loads and loads of posts about this on the Facebook group, so I thought I need to really make a video on this, make a really good video where I talk all about this virus, what it looks like, how you get it, etc., how to treat it, remedy, etc, etc. So I'm going to go into all of that in today's video. So LYMPHOCYSTIS is broken down into two sort of syllables. Lympho, which means something affecting the lymphatic system like cancer or growth, for example, and cystis is referring to like cysts, nodules, lumps, etc. And that is basically what this problem is. Now, LYMPHOCYSTIS is a common virus found in marine and freshwater fish, and many aquarists will often confuse this with other pathogens like Ichthyobodo necatrix, which is white spot, or potential Epistylis, which also looks quite similar. However, there are some quite big determining factors between the two, or between the three I should say. Generally, you'll notice if your fish has LYMPHOCYSTIS, it will start to get some growths on the fin area, potentially on the body as well. More commonly, you'll find it on the dorsal and the caudal fin, and it will form small little waxy type lumps, similar to carp pox. I'll try and put some pictures on the screen throughout this video, and hopefully some videos as well, to show you sort of what it looks like and the different variations of it as well. And then I will just continue talking in the background. So you may see some sort of waxy style nodules, small like white lumps that are generally bigger than white spot or Epistylis. The lumps can sometimes clump together, forming like a cauliflower type look in really extreme cases, and you may see it forming on the gills. Sometimes it forms on the mouth area, similar to sort of a fungus as well, and potentially on the body. Generally, when we see it in our goldfish, it's more, I find it's more on the fins, mainly the caudal and the dorsal fin, you'll see it, rather than on the body area of the fish. Unfortunately, there is no known cure for this virus. I believe in Florida there was a breeding facility that used a human anti-DNA drug to suppress this virus, and they were dosing that into the system. But generally there is really no cure for this, and generally you'll find the fish will get this LYMPHOCYSTIS when they are stressed, they've been moved, they are into a new environment, etc. And generally, if we keep our aquariums clean, we can suppress it a little bit and stop it from outraging and rampaging through our fish. But unfortunately, the fish can catch it from one another, but generally within a good, nicely maintained fish tank or pond, it will subside and you won't have huge, massive outbreaks of it. Sometimes when LYMPHOCYSTIS really takes over and it really attacks a weakened fish, a fish with a low immune system, these cauliflower type growths and these nodules can become more abundant on the fish's body and fins, potentially breaking off, causing some lesions which allow secondary infection to come in. Maybe it's on the gill area, preventing them from taking that oxygen from the water, and in some cases it can unfortunately lead to death. Generally, I found in the majority of cases it always kind of calms down a little bit and it doesn't really take over the fish, but there are some cases where it can get quite prevalent and it can really take hold of the fish and cause death, unfortunately. So how can you identify if your fish have this virus? First of all, it's really easy to look for any bumps on the fish. These will generally be a white to pinkish kind of colour. You may also start to notice a little bit of hazy film on the fish, maybe slight increase in mucus production. The lesions can potentially cause secondary infection, but generally these aren't pathogenic and the lesions won't travel to other fish, for example, and they will be specific to that fish. If the fish is kept in a good environment, these lesions can heal and close back together by themselves without any intervention from the aquarist. But if there is any bacteria potentially getting into those lesions, then they can cause some secondary infection. So that's definitely something to look at if your fish has a severe case of this virus. So now on to how can we treat this virus and how can we prevent it from hurting, damaging or injuring our fish. Well, firstly, unfortunately, as I mentioned, there isn't any real virus cure to get rid of this in our fish, but we can isolate our fish to prevent it from spreading to the other fish. Now, in really low cases, I'm looking at the Ryukin over there because they did have a bit of lymphocytis at one point, but now it's completely calmed down and I can't really see any areas of it. If I do have a video of it when they did have it, I will put that on the screen for you now. But if you do have it, it's really good to identify it to make sure you've got that and you haven't got white spot or epistylis, for example. You can isolate the fish. Now, you could run a few weekly doses of a bacteria treatment to try and suppress it down. Generally, I really try not to use chemicals unless super necessary. And if the fish is really suffering, then definitely we need to get that going. And if the lymphocytis is taking over in the fish, then we do need to definitely intervene. But in low numbers, small cases, I would try not to intervene and I would try to improve the fish's quality of life in the aquarium so that the virus can clear up on its own. Similar to when we humans get colds, when we're a bit run down in winter, we haven't done much exercise, we're not eating properly, it's quite easy for us to catch viruses and colds and flus, for example, when our immune system isn't in tip-top condition and those viruses can get in. And it's the same for the fish as well. If we can do regular water changes, keep the water nice and clear, we can feed lots of food, make sure the environment is really nice and enriched for the goldfish, then generally they can combat this virus themselves. Also, identifying the virus as well, we need to make sure those nodules aren't really getting into the mouth area and preventing our fish from eating, because if this is the case, we either need to put the fish down, unfortunately, or we need to try and remove those nodules so that the fish can still eat to maintain its heightened immune system. We can simply remove these with a surgery. Maybe if you can go to a specialist, this would be really good to get those nodules removed from the fish if it is impacting the mouth or the gill area especially. Generally, the weakened immune system will cause the virus to become more prevalent, so we want to make sure the fish is not under too much or minimal stress if possible to make sure it's got the best recovery going forward from this. So now we've identified the virus, the next step in future is how to prevent it from happening. Generally, if we want to prevent this virus from becoming more abundant, we want to make sure our fish stress is kept minimal as possible. So if we're moving our fish from one environment to the other, we want to make sure when they're traveling, they have a good level of oxygen, they're in a dark environment so they aren't becoming too stressed, and their immune system isn't being pushed down too much. We want to make sure their tank is in tip-top condition. We potentially don't want lots of ornaments, lots of sharp objects that the fish could injure themselves on, which could lead to a secondary bacterial infection, causing that immune system to weaken. And we also potentially don't want to buy fish where we know lymphocytis is prevalent in the tanks, because that could mean that it will be passed on to all of your other fish. Generally, I found if your fish are in a good state of well-being and they are in a stress-free environment, that lymphocytis will show up a little bit, a few nodules may appear, and after a few weeks it may just die down again, and it won't be too much of a problem at all and something we can really ignore as long as the fish are in good health. But if that does become quite prevalent, we want to minimize that stress and make sure our fish's environment is as tip-top condition as possible. Now moving on to equipment, make sure you disinfect any equipment that potentially has been in contact with this virus. We can do this through a number of methods. Obviously everyone has their different ideas for disinfecting equipment, but a really good disinfection to use is potassium permanganate, as it breaks down all organic compounds and it oxidizes with them. It's a really cheap chemical to get, and you can get it really readily online or from your local fish specialist. Also, we want to make sure we create a bath treatment that is nice and strong to make sure we kill anything. And this is not just good for lymphocystis, this is also good for if you've got any parasite problems, if you've got an outbreak of trichodyna and you're using a net from one tank to the other. It's really good to use sort of a bath treatment for your nets or for your equipment to make sure it's nicely disinfected. And now finally onto those preventative measures that I did mention earlier, and that is really making sure your fish is in a nice stress-free environment, making sure they have a good substrate or a bare bottom if they're fancy goldfish. Also making sure we're not stressing them out too much. Now this virus unfortunately does have a really long incubation period, so sometimes it can occur after a long period of having the fish, and the quick change can cause the virus to come out. So it is really hard to monitor if your fish have this viral disease, and unfortunately it is super common, especially in fancy goldfish, and we do see it on the group an awful lot. It generally isn't a detrimental virus to the fish, and generally it is really not much of a problem. Now my Ryukin, I noticed on a couple of my Ryukin they did get it, but I wasn't at all concerned. It flared up, they had a few nodules, and then that went down completely after a couple of weeks, and it was likely just from when they were moved from the dealer to my house, and they had a little bit of a weakened immune system, but they overcame it really quickly and they are doing absolutely amazing. So generally, just to wrap up this short video about lymphocystis, we want to make sure our fish's environment is the best possible. We generally want to try and avoid buying fish from tanks that already have this virus, although it is super common and it is really difficult to do that. But if you can avoid doing that, then that is an ideal scenario. We want to make sure our fish have a good diet, they're eating constantly, and if that virus does pop up, we want to make sure we are maintaining a good level of stress-free environment for our fish, and we want to make sure that our fish have the best life possible and the virus isn't going to cause too much concern and it's not going to become more prevalent throughout the tanks. So I hope that has been quite interesting about lymphocystis. I didn't really see many videos on YouTube about it, so I thought it would be good to make one. I hope I've given you as much tips and information as possible about it. I did feel like I was repeating myself a lot, so I really do apologise about that. I wanted to get as much information as possible that I know about this virus into this video. So if you've got any questions, as always, please leave a comment down below. I hope this has helped maybe one of you, and it has helped answer some questions on this disease or virus that is not shown much on the internet and you can't find that much information about. As always, thank you all for watching. Remember to keep those water changes up, and happy fish keeping.